下面我们有请 RadicalxChange 的 CEO Jennifer 来做她的演讲。
Hi everyone, thank you, Richard, for that. Very thorough. I wish I could understand everything. Breakdown of the book. So, as May said, I'm CEO of RadicalxChange Foundation, which started quite soon after the book was released, because Glenn went around talking about it, and unexpectedly there was a lot of interest, particularly from the blockchain community. And which one do I press? And so the background, still like the book, it's building markets and technology true to the richness of our diversely shared lives. And like Richard explained, we're interested in cooperative social life and more communities that make sense to the way that we live. So when the book came out, it was only last year, and certain groups started to form. It's not just the blockchain community that was interested, it was also people in the arts, people in academia, such as particularly historians. There was already, how I got involved was, I was already working in the arts on a project around data dignity, or data as, I wasn't calling it data as labor, but showing that there was a change that needed to be made. And so Glenn and I met along with a small group. We started to form the RadicalxChange movement in a way. And also at the same time, chapters started to form around the world. And so we thought, okay, well, we should probably start a foundation. Glenn founded it, and the foundation and the movement start to not diverge, but we exist for one thing, and then we mostly exist to support the movement. So we established 4 tracks: arts and communication, entrepreneurship and tech, activism and government, and ideas and research. And this was to make it not siloed tracks, but ones that would work with each other. We have Mark Luder leading the activism and government. I was leading the arts and communication, and Anya Chakravarti, who is a historian with the ideas and research, and Mamie Reingold, who puts together the DevCon conference and also is working with the Ethereum community for entrepreneurship and tech. And so this was to have a several-pronged approach to the ideas. The arts and communication was more interested in playing with the ideas, also remaining a critical side, but trying to make the ideas accessible to the greater community through storytelling, through narratives and games and things like that. Ideas and research is looking at the ideas through the rigor of academia, and they're right now doing field research in places like India, on voting, on data collection, and they're also working on setting up an intellectual commons, and that's also to break away from the hierarchy, the power that's concentrated in academia, especially in peer-reviewed papers, trying to make that more shared, and the authorship is shared as it really is, but how make that reflected in the commons. Entrepreneurship and tech, there's a lot of startups that have started working with the ideas. We'll hear about a few later, or right after me. And activism in government, that's working more at the policy level. So we've met with some, I'll show you later, we just recently met with some governments and policymakers in several areas. So we quickly grew to like 80 volunteers, kept having chapters forming. This is only a small amount, there's probably like 150 now. And we had our first convening in last March in Detroit, where we got to bring together everybody. It wasn't yet where we had exact radical exchange ideas being implemented, but where we had ideas starting to collide with what was going on in the different disciplines. And so in April, Glenn had recently had a baby, but he stepped down from the leadership also because he didn't want it to become about him. And Matt Pruitt and I went into that position. We were asked to step up, and we did so. And so this is right after the conference, things started to kind of ramp up. One example of working with quadratic voting with a startup is, it's a nonprofit startup, is Democracy Earth in Santiago Sur. And the Colorado, I can't see this, so this is in April this past April, Colorado, the legislature, the government of Colorado, decided to use quadratic voting on how they would spend $120 million in requests for their budget from a $40 million budget. So we teamed up with Santiago Sur, Democracy Earth, and they developed the interface for it. And then the legislatures, they voted using this, and they said that they maybe still arrived at the same final decisions, but it had a lot more nuance. So they saw what things mattered to certain people more than they were able to see before. So that was a success. And then also recently, Governor Newsom in California has been talking about sharing the wealth of personal data, so big platform companies like Facebook and Google having to pay a social dividend. He doesn't know yet what that means, so there's that kind of opportunity, and working with a lot of mechanism designers and with startups to show him what that is. So basically I'm saying that often at the policy level, at the government level, they might think there's a good idea, but they need people from all of these different disciplines and people like yourself to actually think through what's the best way to move forward with that, what's fair, and then also to implement it especially. And then just recently, just last month, we sent a team, Vitalik, Glenn, and Matt, and each person representing all of the 5 ideas to Canada, and to speak with the parliament there and present all of the ideas, and their intention is to start implementing them in their society or in their policy. So we started off with the same people that were leading the tracks were also the board members. Now we're growing the board, so Vitalik has joined, Vitalik Buterin, Danielle Allen, who's a political theorist, and Audrey Tang, who's the digital minister of Taiwan. And we just presented at the World Economic Forum, and now the book is going to be coming out in Chinese. And so there's much more to come. Now, that's the end of, that was just a bit of a timeline to see how it's moving forward. And I don't know if anybody's followed what happened at the conference, but when Vitalik spoke, he pointed out a few specific details that are the primary overlaps between blockchain and radical exchange, or radical markets, radical exchange. And they are that we both see money and so many social institutions as social constructs, or many institutions as social constructs. We both are using mechanism design and believe in decentralization as a primary vehicle to achieving a just society. So the foundation, what we're doing is we're right now focused on getting the ideas out there. So we're educating and inspiring, and we're building a platform to do that with media, the TV channel, artworks, and blogs, things like that. So that's in the works. There's some bits here and there, but if you go to the website, it's not prepared yet for that. We're also mainly focused on connecting people, so matchmaking. Since especially there's lots of chapters around the world, we want to make sure that they can collaborate, that they can be in touch, that the ideas can be developed from off of each other. So we're building an infrastructure for that to happen. There's going to be very soon there'll be released a directory and a map that you can see and easily connect with other chapters, and also a place to put the projects that you're working on, and also a curriculum to work from as well, and resources. And then we're also really focused on convening people, so we're going to have another conference, a big conference annually. The next one will probably be in South America and Europe, hopefully soon in China. And so that's really about bringing people together, talking about the ideas, unlike the first conference where we didn't have that, but showing the results of people working with the ideas. There was a project exchange last time, which was really successful, where people at the conference were able to work on a project in different teams. And we also will be having, Glenn has been working on a manifesto that's going to have the ideas and how they've been developing. Because where the ideas were in the book, we don't look at the book like the Bible, we more are interested in pushing them further and working with the community to get those ideas pushed further. We also want to make sure that there's a bottoms-up approach to the ideas coming into the world. So we have the connections with many different levels of policymaking, and so we're building an infrastructure to allow that to happen. So for the ideas to bubble up and local communities to be able to get to their local policymakers, or if it's still government, the people making the decisions until we get to a better state of where we want to be. And matchmaking, advisory, if somebody in this community is specialist in one of the ideas or one of the ways, and somebody else needs that kind of person, that's another thing that we really want to enable, is that matchmaking with the community and also within RadicalxChange. And I think one last thing that we were trying to figure out is RadicalxChange in Chinese. Oh, sorry, I'm going to go through this. So the methods are replacing capitalism from within by developing ideas, communities, and organizations that practice fairer and more efficient forms of organization, challenging basic inherited institutions by building better modernized ones, increasing public knowledge about the emancipatory potential of new ideas and mechanism design, evolving our vision from the bottom up, coexisting with and working within existing institutions, and building public goods providers that benefit people and communities. The future that we believe in is a world where power rests in diverse and emergent democratic organizations. And so, as I understand, this will be a chapter forming, so we also ask that the core values are respected, which are openness, egalitarianism, dignity, and social innovation. And so this was what I wanted to end on, the right term for RadicalxChange. We're finding that in a lot of countries, radical is not understood in all of its ways, and it can cause problems that we don't want to be blocked by, basically. So this was the more recent version that a lot of people said they don't know the first two characters anymore. They're not very, they're a bit old, right? So I'm opening that up as well to this community if you have other ideas. We still haven't decided, but that's probably the most recent one. But thank you all for coming and for being interested in RadicalxChange.
最后一点就是 就说我们 RadicalxChange 的中文名字，大家如果有更好的一些想法的话，可以说一下。这个名字主要是说，就是 RadicalxChange， 然后好像这个在古文里面有一种激流、这种激烈的变化的意思。如果大家有更好想法，可以说。好，大家有什么问题可以举大手。大家有什么问题吗？可以举一下手。
I was just curious of using radical because I think the perception of radical is something that is extreme or something that is completely unconventional. But some of the ideas that you proposed are pretty common sense, or is it something that people should be doing nonetheless? So I was wondering, how do you deal with the perception of this term radical and the common perceptions of it in this day and age?
Well, that's what we usually just have to explain at the moment, like Richard did with explaining the etymology of it, being at the root, so getting to that cause. And then some of the ideas in different places, people, especially private property in the US, to the idea of applying cost to people's private homes is very undesirable. For a lot of people really have a hard time. So there is a radicalness to certain communities, depending on where you're from. So we like that it embraces all of that it does represent the root causes, but also really different ideas, really out there, depending on where you're based or what the idea is. And I guess like a turning over, a change. So we don't have, that's one thing that we're coming up against. We didn't know in South America there's a problem with radical because that will immediately make people think that we're a revolutionary group. So we're trying to work with each place when that happens to see, like, we don't want to insist on what it should be called, but for you to figure out what feels right. And I know, so I was in Beijing yesterday, and there was one woman that came to sit down when she saw this quote, this phrase, and a couple of others up there. And she said she liked this one because it's neutral. And then somebody else from this community, Taylor, who's not here, he was saying, yes, Chinese like neutral, not too extremes. So, but I can't imagine everybody is the same. So it's really for the community to decide.
Sure, thanks.
大家还有问题的话，可以举个手。
Yes, hello. You mentioned cost and that this is something which basically is going to guide people when they're making their decisions. And up to now, we have basically seen that whenever you apply cost to something, people's brains tend to like start to override. Basically, they cannot really do good decisions when you implement that cost factor to them. So how do you think that this is socially scalable? I mean, here in the blockchain industry and cryptocurrencies, we are quite okay with free markets, speculating on them, creating different game theories, how to play the game, how to win the game, how to extract the most value out of the game. But for the majority of the people, this is not something that they really have brains free to do, especially on a daily basis, especially with many of the mundane decisions that they have to make with their lives. And after all, like when you want to purchase a house, you basically remove a problem from your head. You know, like, okay, I'm done with that, and now let's go to the next chapter. But if this is going to haunt you and stay with you the whole time, how do you think that is going to affect the way that we interact with the economy, with finance, and with each other.
Thank you. So with cost, I think we're not pushing for the private residential property as the first test, basically, or the first case that it's implemented. So it depends again on where. I think in China, people, there's a lot of new building, so there's probably a lot of places still available, not being put to their best use. Maybe in the US, a lot of this as well, where there's empty villages, abandoned places like that might be a good place to start. And then I think you do have two kinds of people, ones that have been inheriting private property and they don't want to lose that family house or they don't want to move, and then you have like nomads, people that move a lot or just don't want to. So it's also so I think you would probably see more taken up or adoption from certain groups more than others, and the way that it would be made more accessible or more like it's not a complex thing would be the technology side. So we are working first. We're seeing this applied more to places that are more intangible, like intellectual property, which is also another big disruption that needs to happen. And also with like radio spectrum, there's a lot of monopolization and these things are not being put to their best use. I could see it also working quite well in commercial spaces. And so like when you have, where was I recently? I was living in Trenton, New Jersey, lots of empty shop fronts, or places like that where the landlord is sitting on the property and just waiting, speculating for it to go up eventually. The harbinger tax in that case would hopefully make it so that they wouldn't want to do that because it would be too costly for them. And then they would rent it out or they would sell it and places could become more vibrant again and businesses could start and thrive. Then there's places like in South America where I think in Chile, they're interested in applying this to public land, public property, like waterways, flight paths. So I think there's a gradual way that we could get there through less cherished property like your home. But that could maybe be made for certain properties that are less ancient in their history regarding family, like, and for people that enjoy that lifestyle. But I think starting with not residential is where we're kind of focusing that so it's not becoming an initial problem that people automatically shut down the idea of cost. Does that answer?
Yes.
Thanks.
有其他问题的第一个是，如果没有的话，我们接下来有请两位嘉宾来介绍他们的理念去运用 Radical Market 这本书的一些